What's good, everybody? What's good? Let's pile in. Let's all lock in. Tell your mama, tell your friends, tell your brother, tell your cousin. Simon Hill, Keep It Trill is going live right now. We live right now. It's still hood style. I'm still figuring out the live stream chat, of course. I got the chat right here on my phone. I'll be replying to messages that way for anybody who wants to build and construct tonight on this Saturday evening. As you can see from the monitors, 9:20 p.m. and we inside right now. Might head out a little bit later. I still got a lot of work to do, but I'm not going to be on here long for the live. I wanted to keep it light today and talk about something related to music because I had a live stream planned where I was going to talk about some real heavy stuff. But this stream right here is going to show you a lot about what I'm talking about, how white supremacy dominates the planet, how white supremacists are in control of the levers of power, and how we need to constantly fight back against the messaging that the white supremacists put out there about us, our societies, and our people. And not even just black people, but everybody, because this is getting out of hand. This is getting out of hand. Let's get the live stream popping. We're not going to waste any time. We're going to jump right in. We're going to talk today about this man named Jan Wenner. That's how I'm going to be pronouncing his name the entire time throughout the stream. If that's the wrong way to pronounce it, y'all can correct me in the chat, correct me later in the playback in the comments, or realize that I just don't give a what. We're talking about Jan Wenner, who was the founder of Rolling Stone magazine, one of the most popular magazines in history, the Bible for rock and roll and rock music and music in general for a lot of people around the world. The founder of this magazine is now publishing a book. And in it, as he's going on his press run, talking to the media and trying to articulate why people should pick up his book. And when people are asking him, how come you aren't talking about or to any of the black pioneers for rock and roll? His words are, well, they're just not articulate enough. They just don't philosophize about rock and roll enough. Some people might watch this live stream or this chat and say, why should I care about some old, rich, fat white man, right? Why should I care about his opinion or his book? It's because this person has been very influential on shaping the minds and perceptions and perspectives of people all across the world when it comes to one of the most influential cultural forces America has ever produced, which is rock and roll. Why is this more important than talking about the neo Nazis or the guys who have swastikas on their chest and stuff like that? Because let's keep it real. White supremacists come in all shapes, sizes, colors, and temperaments and attitudes. But the worst white supremacists and the ones we need to watch out for the most are the ones behind the scenes, in the corporate offices, in the C suites. Let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it real. We're not that worried about the white supremacists that are outside in the street doing Sig Heil and Nazi salutes. We're not worried about those guys that much because most of the time those guys are idiots. They're drugged out. They're white trash. Other white people don't even take them seriously. But the white supremacists we do need to watch out for and constantly be on the alert for and constantly push back against the weapons that they use, which are words. The ones that we need to fight against the most are guys like Jan Wenner, who say slick stuff like this. And let's keep it real too. We're building tonight. We're building tonight. I see Ozzy is in the chat. Ozzy said, hello, Simon. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Yeah. Where I'm at, it's nighttime now, evening, but we still building heavy. So shout out to Ozzy. But let's keep it real. The white supremacists use messaging. They use trick coded language. If you're a black person and you ever went into a job interview and then they call you back and say, you know what, you're not the right cultural fit for our office. Those are the trick language. That's the trick language white people use, white supremacists use. Let's not use white people. That's the trick language white supremacists use to dominate over us. They're very sneaky with their words. And guys like Jan Wenner have probably been saying much worse stuff behind closed doors and using their levers of power to make stuff work in their favor. But we're not going to disrespect our ancestors. We're not going to disrespect the black pioneers who built some of the greatest cultural movements, music, art forms from America, from anywhere in the world. We're not going to disrespect any of our people because We are not going to sit here and denigrate any other group, so we're not going to take disrespect on our end. So let's get into what Jan Wenner said. This is an article from consequencesound.com. All the links to the articles will be in the chat. Jan Wenner says black and female musicians don't articulate at the level of white men. The Rolling Stone founder explained the lack of diversity in his new book, The Masters. Come on now, what type of book are you writing titled The Masters? Talking about rock and roll. This is what I'm talking about, the trick coded language of white supremacists. And some people are going to watch this first 10 minutes of this live stream and say, well, Jan Wenner can't be a white supremacist because he's Jewish. But we're going to build on that real heavy later. And by the way, we don't disrespect Jewish people. We don't hate Jewish people. We don't hate anybody at all, but we definitely hate white supremacists. Let's get to it. This was written by Abby Jones, published on September 15th, 2023. To say Jan Wenner hasn't had the cleanest reputation would be an understatement, but it seems he's still finding new ways to dig his own grave. The Rolling Stone co-founder spoke to the New York Times about his upcoming book, The Masters, which compiles interviews with 7 musicians who are all white men: Bono, Bob Dylan, Jerry Garcia, Mick Jagger, John Lennon, Bruce Springsteen, and Pete Townshend. Wenner justified the lack of diversity by arguing that black and female artists just didn't articulate at the level of their white male peers. There are some people who are going to say, well, this book is just a compilation of his favorite artists, like his favorite, musicians. And if they turn out to all be white, hey, that's how it is. And I can sympathize with that argument because I love hip hop. And the majority of the rappers that I love are black men. But I got to keep it a buck. If I was writing a book titled Hip Hop Masters, the Masters of Rap, if I left out Eminem, could anybody take my book seriously? I would be being racist by leaving out Eminem, by denigrating his contributions to hip hop. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. There might be black people watching who might say, Eminem is not the GOAT. He's not the greatest. You could argue that. I could argue that. But to say that Eminem hasn't made contributions to hip hop, come on. So if you're going to say that, that doesn't make any sense. Or if you're going to say, well, the guys he's interviewing are guys that, are still alive and kicking. John Lennon's dead, been dead. Ain't no interviews that you can do with him now. So then I don't know what type of argument that is either. Anyway, let's keep on going. In the introduction to the Masters, Wenner notes that the black performers were not a part of his zeitgeist, a stance he doubled down on in the Times interview. When I was referring to the zeitgeist, I was referring to black performers, not to the female performers, okay? Just to get that accurate, he quipped. There is no time in American history where black musicians have not been at the forefront or making the zeitgeist. So for Wenner to say, black musicians never, resonated with me, that's a damn lie. Because how can you live in America and not love Stevie Wonder? How can you not love Marvin Gaye? How can you not love Jimi Hendrix if you're really into rock and roll? How can you not love the Isley Brothers? How can you not love Earth, Wind, and Fire? And so on and so on and so on. You know what I mean? Listen, I'm going to keep it real with y'all. I'm a 90s baby, born in 1990. I'm not big on digging into the crates, the vinyl records, and all that stuff. I'm not that well informed about older music. But I am informed, and we're going to learn and build heavy tonight about the history of rock and roll, because we're going to defend this till the day we leave this planet. We are not going to let anybody denigrate our contributions to music, our contributions to culture at all, period. Wenner explained that the artists selected for the book, most of whom, it's worth noting, were his close friends, were not a deliberate selection, but instead were intuitive choices informed by his personal interests and a love of them. But he also slightly contradicts himself in the same interview, stating that these so-called masters of rock and roll also had to meet a couple of criteria and measure up to all the nebulous historical standard. Let's keep it real, guys. This is the trick language and the trick actions that the white supremacists do. They say this all the time. We're not purposefully not selecting the black candidates for the job. We're just picking the people that are the right fit. And even though John, Bob, and Matthew are all my close homies, they have the right criteria to work in the office. They have the right criteria to get the job. DeMarcus, I'm sorry, man. You're not fitting the right mold. That's the sort of trick stuff he's doing, like the same stuff that we see all the time dealing with the white supremacists in society. Let's continue building. Insofar as the women, just none of them were as articulate enough on this intellectual level, Wenner went on. Joni Mitchell was not a philosopher of rock and roll. She didn't, in my mind, meet that test, not by her work, not by other interviews she did. The people I interviewed were the kind of philosophers of rock. I suppose when you use a word as broad as masters, the fault is using the word. Maybe Marvin Gaye or Curtis Mayfield. I mean, they just didn't articulate at that level. How disrespectful and how sexist do you have to be? Like, seriously, to say, there are no females who can philosophize about rock and roll, or think deeply about the cultural impact that rock music had, or the history of rock music. That's really disrespectful. And this shows, guys, this shows a lot of the times these white supremacists also have negative views about other groups of people. They will always have primarily anti-black views, but usually somebody who's very anti-black also is going to be sexist as well, and xenophobic as well, and many other things. Let's keep it going. Seemingly attempting to move on to the next topic, Winner concluded, just for public relations sake, maybe I should have gone and found one black and one woman artist to include here that didn't measure up to that same historical standard, just to avert this kind of criticism, which I get it. See, this is somebody who's not really reflective on the fact that, maybe he might be anti-black, racist, sexist, and that sort of thing. He's just like, you know what? I got caught. I got caught. People are calling me out on my stuff. So you know what I should have done instead? I should have just got one token black artist, one token white artist, and that sort of thing. And listen, there are some people who are they're sick of the, how can I say this, the diversity and inclusion that's forced down our throats. I can feel that. I sympathize with that for real, because I hate turning on Netflix, watching a movie, and everything has to be an interracial couple. There has to be a gay character. There has to be a trans character. I can understand that, because sometimes it does seem forced. I feel that. But there is no way you can talk about music, American music, and talk about the masters of rock and roll, talk about the people who are the pinnacle of this art form, and not mention or not include a single black face, and even keeping it real, a single woman. Come on now, come on. Let's get to some comments real quick. All right, so OSB said the Beatles definitely paid homage to the Delta blues and that it birthed their sound. Rolling Stones got their style from the Beatles, so he is invalid, hands down. Shout out to OZB. He never heard a Jimi Hendrix song. Like, come on, that's for real. Real comment from OZB. They are more polished, and I love Jimi Hendrix, man. He's lived in a bubble his whole life. He has to. He has to. But the crazy thing is, a lot of the white supremacists, the sickest white supremacists, are the ones who are around black people all the time, or around the people that they despise all the time. Let's keep it real. Jerry Jones, the guy who owns the Cowboys, the football team in the U.S., hella racist old man. Probably has employed hundreds of black men. His whole empire is built on black men. I'm pretty sure most of the record executives, they build their empires, millions of dollars. They make off of the words and ideas and thoughts and creations of black men and black people and other people that they despise. And yet, they still hold anti-black views, and that's sick. And we have to fight against it. Let's wrap up this article real quick. Winner left Rolling Stone in 2019. The following year, the magazine updated its list on the top 500 albums of all time, bringing many more female and black artists into its top 50. That goes to show, that's a little bit of evidence here that maybe this man, Jan Wenner, while he was working at Rolling Stone, was saying, you know what, the 500 albums of all time, 499 of them were made by the Beatles. You know what I mean? We know that they were made by, the Rolling Stones, Sex Pistols, whatever. Like, let's give it a buck. Like, there is no way that this man does not hold some anti-black views. Let's get into his history, because listen, we're not going to judge a man by just what he says in an article, because every week people get canceled. Every week people get words thrown out of context. So let's do a deep dive on who Jan Wenner is. This is from Wikipedia. And listen, at the top of the article, it says this article's criticism or controversy section may compromise the article's neutrality by separating out potentially negative information. Please integrate the section's contents, yada, yada, yada. But let's get into him. Jan Simon Wenner. See, glad his first name isn't Simon, because he's definitely not handsome. Let's go. So Jan Wenner Simon, Jan Simon Wenner, born January 7th, 1946, is an American magazine magnate who is the founder of the popular culture magazine Rolling Stone and former owner of Men's Journal magazine. He participated in the free speech movement while attending the University of California, Berkeley. Wenner, with his mother, Ralph J. Gleason, founded Rolling Stone in 1967. Later in his career, Wenner founded the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and founded other publications. As a publisher and media figure, he has faced controversy regarding Hall of Fame eligibility, favoritism, the breakdown of his relationship with gonzo journalist Hunter S. Thompson, and criticism that his magazine's reviews were biased. Let's keep it real, guys. These white supremacists have a lot of power. The same man, and I didn't know this until today, the same man who founded Rolling Stone also founded the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and also owned Men's Journal. I think that's the magazine, if I remember right, from the early 2000s with all the hot girls on the cover. And, if you couldn't get a Playboy, you might pick up a Men's Journal and bust one to the lady on page 37. Let's keep it a buck. But it's crazy how much power is concentrated in the hands of so few people. And especially the fact that these people hold anti-black views, white supremacist views. Let's keep it a buck. So, early life and career. Wenner was born in San Francisco Bay Area, the son of Sim and Edward Wenner. He grew up in a secular Jewish family. Now, a lot of people, let's build on this right now, right now, right now. Let's bring it on the table right now. A lot of people are going to say, how can this man be a white supremacist if he is Jewish? There are white supremacists who are black. Candace Owens, Clarence Thomas. There are white supremacists that come in all shapes, forms. White supremacy is not about your skin tone. It's about your thinking, your mentality, how you view the world, who is eligible and who is ineligible, who is worthy and who is unworthy. And this man, Jan Wenner, despite his Jewish heritage, has white supremacist thinking, which is inherently tied to anti-black thinking, based on his comments about what he said about rock and roll, about the artist not being articulate enough to philosophize on rock and roll. Let's keep it real. This man, even though he might be Jewish, grew up in America, grew up in a country that forces people to imbibe and drink and consume anti-blackness from its very birth. He was born in 1946, before the end of segregation, legal apartheid in America. And even though he grew up in the Bay Area, California has had a history of being horrible to black people. I'm pretty sure he grew up in an area that was either, if not all Jewish, pretty much all white. And he integrated into WASP society and Anglo society and general white society. Let's keep it real. Just because somebody is Jewish does not mean that they're anti black. Because let's keep it real. What's going on in Israel right now with the black Ethiopians and Eritreans who are there in Israel, and they are Jewish or they are integrated into the society, and they are dealing with tons of racism in Israel. So nobody can say, oh, just because somebody is Jewish, they can't be racist. We're going to stop that right there, right there. His parents divorced in 1958, and he and his sisters, Kate and Marilyn, were sent to boarding schools. He completed his secondary education at the Chadwick School in 1963 and went on to attend the University of California, Berkeley. Before dropping out of Berkeley in 1966, Werner was active in the free speech movement and produced the column Something's Happening in the student-run newspaper, The Daily Californian. With the help of his mentor, San Francisco Chronicle jazz critic Ralph J. Gleason, Wenner landed a job at Ramparts, a high circulation muckraker, where Gleason was a contributing editor and Wenner worked on the magazine's spinoff newspaper. I don't want to go off into a tangent, but I think a muckraker is like a magazine that's like a tabloid or something like that. Let's get to some comments real quick. Why is Jewish considered a race by so many, says Ozzy. He's white. Let's keep it real. Jewish is an ethnicity and a religion, and they view themselves as a tribe rather than a race. And listen, I'm not going to get canceled, and I'm not going to get into the weeds about who's Jewish, what is Jewish, and that sort of thing. But let's keep it real. This is a white man. We are not going to sit here and say, yo, he's Jewish, so he's no longer white. Only really hardcore racist white supremacists look at Jewish people as if they're not white. The rest of normal white society who holds implicitly anti-black views and white supremacist views still look at Jewish people and say, okay, there's some of us. They're at least not black. That sort of thing. Like only really hardcore people differentiate between whites and the Jews. There are black Jews. There are Asian Jews. There are Indian Jews. There are all sorts of Jews. Jewish is not a race in My opinion. Let's keep it real. And if anybody wants to challenge me on that, debate me on that, and not just try to cancel me on that, let's really build. Let's talk. Let's debate. Let's talk about that. But under no circumstance does this man not have white privilege, right? Let's go here. So Guyana Brent says peace and love, chat. Yeah, peace and love to Guyana Brent. He's been showing up a lot in the chat. Ozzy says some of the most liberal cities are incredibly segregated and have high levels of racial inequality. Big facts. But let's talk about Jan Wenner and his effects in the music industry. So in 1967, Wenner and Gleason founded Rolling Stone magazine in San Francisco. To get the magazine started, Wenner borrowed $7,500 from family members and from the family of his soon-to-be wife, Jane Scheidelheim. Right? I'm sure in 1967, $7,500 would be like maybe 30,000 today, something like that, right? That was back when you could buy a house for no more than 10K. You know what I mean? So throughout the 70s and 80s, Wenner played an integral role in popularizing writers such as Hunter S. Thompson, Ben Fong Torres, Paul Nelson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He also discovered photographer Annie Leibovitz when she was 21 years old, San Francisco Art Institute student. Many of Wenner's proteges, such as Crow, credit him with giving them their biggest breaks. Tom Wolfe recognized Wenner's influence in ensuring that his first novel, The Bonfire of the Vanities, was completed, stating, I was absolutely frozen with fright about getting it done, and I decided to serialize it, and the only editor crazy enough to do that was Jan. Listen, a lot of these magnates in the publishing industry, in any sort of industry, give the hookup to a lot of young, hungry people who are coming up, right? And even though he might have created careers for people who probably don't share his views, this doesn't let him off of the hook for being anti-black and what he's talking about now. And let's continue. In 1977, Rolling Stone shifted its base of operations from San Francisco to New York City. The magazine's circulation dipped briefly in the late 70s and early 80s as Rolling Stone responded slowly in covering the emergence of punk rock, and again in the 1990s when it lost ground to Spin and Blender in coverage of hip hop. Wenner hired former FHM editor Ed Needham, who was then replaced by Will Dana, to turn his flagship magazine around. And by 2006, Rolling Stone's circulation was at an all-time high of 1.5 million copies sold every fortnight. In May 2006, Rolling Stone published its 1000th edition with a holographic 3D cover modeled on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover. I'm going to keep it real, guys. When I was in college, I went to Loyola University, very liberal arts university, to study music. And one of my professors was pushing heavy, heavy. He was an old white guy like this. He was pushing us heavy to listen to Sgt. Pepper's and how great of an album it was. I'm gonna keep it real. Sgt. Pepper's is trash. I can't listen to that. And most of the Beatles catalog, to me, is trash. But that just proves my point even more. If I was to write a book about rock and roll music, the history of popular music, I could not leave out the Beatles. I could not say the Beatles are not the masters of rock and roll or one of the most influential bands in history, even though I hate it, even though it's not my forte. Come on now, let's keep it real. A lot of these guys, they have to be playing themselves to really think like this. You know what I mean? And magazines like Rolling Stone, major media outlets like MTV, they hated on hip hop when it first came out. They thought it was a trend. They thought it was a fad. They thought hip hop wouldn't last. The same way a lot of black art forms when they first appear, when reggae first appeared, when ska first appeared, when ragtime first appeared, when jazz first appeared, when blues first appeared. A lot of the times, the white supremacists and the dominant society say, these Negroes are making music that's jungle music. This music will never last. There's no artistic art form in it and that sort of thing. And then what do we see later? Jazz becomes institutionalized as a part of high society of music all around the world. Bob Marley is a hero all across the world. Reggae music is one of the most popular art forms across the world. People always hate on us, and then they end up losing at the end, especially to our contributions to music. Let's continue. I'm ranting right now. I didn't say I wanted to be here long, but we might be here all night. Let's go. Wenner has been involved in the conducting and writing of many of the magazine's Rolling Stone interviews. His interview subjects have included Bill Clinton, Al Gore, John Kerry, and Barack Obama for the magazine during their election campaigns, and in November 2005 had an interview with U2 rock star Bono, which focused on music and politics. Wenner's interview with Bono received a National Magazine Award nomination. Rolling Stone and Winter are chronicled in three books: Gone Crazy and Back Again by Robert Sam Anson, Rolling Stone, The Uncensored History of Robert Draper, and Sticky Fingers, The Life and Times of Jan Wenner, and Rolling Stone Magazine by Joe Hagan. Robin Greene's memoir, The Only Girl, refers covers the time she worked at Rolling Stone. Winter founded the magazine outside in 1977, where William Randolph Hearst III and Jack Ford both worked before Winter sold it a year later. He also briefly managed the magazine Look, and in 1993 started the magazine Family Life. In 1985, he bought a share in Us Weekly, followed by a joint purchase of the magazine with the Walt Disney Company the following year. The magazine made the transition from a monthly to weekly in 2000, and in August 2006, Winter bought out Disney's share to consolidate 100% ownership. It's really crazy how in America, a few people, a few very rich people, and also a very few companies control the media. And that sounds like a conspiracy you might hear from like right wingers or people who are like, the media is always lying to us, bro. The media is lying to us. But it's actually really true. A handful of companies, a handful of people control the majority of what we see. It's really a miracle that we do have platforms like X, like YouTube, like Facebook, like Instagram. And even Facebook and Instagram are owned by one company, and Google owns YouTube. But still, it's really amazing that we have a platform for us to build, talk, and share information like this. Because if we only relied on TV, if we only relied on magazines, if we only relied on newspapers, we would be in the hands of four companies and like seven individuals. And that's crazy. That's crazy. And I don't think anybody in a right mind would want us to continue down in this world like this, where we want to continue to see media being controlled by a handful of people, especially people with anti-black views and racist and white supremacist views. Let's go. From 2004 to 2006, Winter contributed approximately $63,000 to Democratic candidates and liberal organizations. We're going to build on that right there. Let's talk. A lot of people say, who's really racist? Guess who's really racist? The liberals. Liberals are really more racist than conservatives. The Democrats are really more racist than Republicans. People that are, say that they love gay people and they love black people, those are the ones who are really the most racist, right? Let's build on that. I don't differentiate between white supremacists. I don't differentiate between a Democrat or a Republican or a liberal and a conservative. You can be liberal as hell and still have anti-black and racist views. A lot of the times, people, especially very, very powerful people like Jan Wenner, give money to both sides. Of course, he donated to the Democrats, but that doesn't mean he won't vote Republican or also give money to a Republican PAC or a conservative PAC and that sort of thing. When you're very wealthy and you're at the top, these wealthy companies, these wealthy individuals, they play both sides of the game. It's not like they're saying, oh, we only give money to Democrats or we only give money to Republicans. They don't differentiate because they realize that they can buy politicians and buy influence. Let's continue. In September 2016, Advertising Age reported that Winter was in the process of selling a 49% stake in Rolling Stone to Singaporean company Band Lab Technologies. The new investor would have no direct involvement in the editorial content of the magazine. In October 2016, Winter started publishing Glixel, a video games based website, blah, blah, blah. In September 2017, Winter Media announced that the remaining 51% of Rolling Stone was up for sale. The share was bought by Penske Media Corporation, who later acquired the remaining stake from BandLab. In 2022, Little Brown and Company published Winter's memoir, Like a Rolling Stone. Let's get to the chat. All right, nothing in the chat right now, but let's keep on building. Let's keep on building. So he's had some controversies in his life. And listen, we're going to read through the entire article because we want to get a grasp on who this man is before we get to the really heavy science of building on who invented rock and roll and why the real masters of rock and roll are melanated people, melanated Americans. Let's go. Hunter S. Thompson. We're not going to. Let's go. Hunter S. Thompson was to provide Rolling Stone coverage for the 1976 presidential campaign that would appear in a book published by the magazine. Reportedly, as Thompson was waiting for a $75,000 advance check to arrive, he learned that Winter canceled the endeavor without telling him. Winter then asked Thompson to travel to Vietnam to report on what appeared to be the closing of the Vietnam War. Thompson accepted and arrived with the country in chaos, just as the United States was preparing to evacuate, and other journalists were scrambling to find transportation out of the region. Thompson's story about the fall of Saigon would not be published in Rolling Stone until 10 years later. Thompson contributed far less to the publication in later years. Yeah, that's real dirty. You sent your man off to a war zone to risk his life after you didn't pay him, and then you didn't publish his article. It sounds like he wanted him to get clapped up over there in Vietnam. Either get clapped up by the Viet Cong, or get the clap from from a nice little Vietnamese broad. I mean, that's just dirty. That's dirty. You sent your man on a dummy mission. Let's go. Hootie and the Blowfish review. Winner fired rock critic Jim Derotagis in 1996 when Derotagis published a negative review for an album by the then popular band Hootie and the Blowfish. Winner pulled derogative review from the magazine. Asked by the New York Observer if Winner was a fan of Hootie and the Blowfish, Derotagis responded that Winner is a fan of any band that sells 8 million records. Winner fired Derotagis the next day. Yeah, that's dirty. You got to let people write reviews. If you vet your writers, if your writers are working hard for you, don't be a dirty guy, Jan Winner, and fire him just because he wrote something that you didn't like. And let's keep it real. A lot of the magazines back in the day, the Source, the Double XL, Vibe, Rolling Stone, I'm pretty sure the record labels were sliding money to the reviewers, to the magazine itself, to the owners, to get positive coverage on their artists' latest creations, their latest releases. That's just probably standard in the music industry, especially, 20, 30 years ago when everything was real dirty, when they didn't have social media. There were no whistleblowers like there are now on social media letting people know what's going on behind the scenes. The music industry is historically dirty. It's dirty as hell. And so this guy, Jan Winner, is dirty too. All right, let's continue. Sticky Fingers. In June 2017, Winner cut ties with Joe Hagan, the biographer he had commissioned to write his biography, Sticky Fingers, calling the book Hagan produced deeply flawed and tawdry rather than substantial. Hagan had been working closely with Winner on the book since 2013, and Sticky Fingers was released in October 2017. New York Times interview. In September 2023, Winner was interviewed by the New York Times' David Marchese about his book, The Masters, and its basis of 7 white guys. Specifically, Winner was asked about the book's introduction, in which he claimed that black and female artists were not in his zeitgeist. In response, Winner said that female artists were not articulate enough on this intellectual level to be included in his list of masterful musicians. Let's keep it real, too. The guys he has in his book are not like PhD level guys. Bono, Bob Dylan, Jerry Garcia, Mick Jagger, John Lennon, Bruce Springsteen, and Pete Townshend. All of these guys are high school dropouts. All of these guys just picked up a guitar, a drum, a bass, and just started playing. It's not like these guys know music in and out. Maybe they learned it later on, but come on, a lot of the people involved in music are people who didn't attain their success through the square world's way, which is education, hard work, or the white supremacist way, which is a family connection. My uncle knows a guy who can get you into the office and that sort of thing. A lot of musicians are not the sharpest tools in the shed. So to say like women can't articulate as well as Jerry Garcia, a known pothead and stoner, come on now. Let's get to his personal life before we start really building heavy on the history of rock and roll and black music. In the summer of 67, after Rolling Stone started, Winner and Jane Schindelheim were married in a small Jewish ceremony. Winner and his wife separated in 1995, though Jane Winner still remains a vice president of Winner Media. She and Winner have 3 sons, Alexander John, Theodore, Theo, Simon. So, y'all stop giving them my name, man. Y'all keep that name for me, man. Let me be the only chocolate handsome Simon out here. Don't let these, sons and daughters who are spawns of white supremacists walk around with that beautiful name on them. Come on now. And Edward Augustus, known as Gus, head of Winner Media's digital operations. Since 1995, Winner's domestic partner has been Matt Nye, a man, yes, a fashion designer. Together, Winner and Nye have 3 children born via surrogate mothers, Noah and twins Jude and India Rose. One of the saddest things about the white supremacists, man, is that a lot of them, the rich ones, really reproduce, like Elon Musk and Jan Winner. They just love like spreading their seed, because I think a lot of the white supremacists really think, the rich white supremacists, we're not talking about the the guys with missing teeth who do meth and then say, Hail Hitler and all that. We're talking about the real white supremacists, the guys with money, power, influence, who can go to war and send us to war and really change the world with their words and with their moves. These guys think that they have the best genes, that they're the most intelligent, and that it's their duty to make sure that the next generation is intelligent. I'm not making this up now. This is eugenics. Look this up. Type in modern eugenics right now, and you'll see that the very wealthy people at the very top, they're all talking about we need to make sure the next generation has our genetics. They really believe this, man. I'm not making this up right now. So we were building heavy on Jan Wenner, the gay Jewish publishing magnate who started Rolling Stone, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, owned Men's Journal. It's been involved in the music industry and the publishing industry for years. If you're just now joining the live stream now, we're talking about his comments saying that black musicians and female musicians aren't articulate or intelligent enough to philosophize about rock and roll, as he's publishing his new book titled The Masters. This is sick, man. It's sick on so many levels. If you read between the lines and you know how these white supremacists work, you realize it's very sick. I have the actual article from the New York Times here because I know a lot of the times people in the media can take something out of context from an interview, right? And I even paid for a New York Times subscription just to share with y'all tonight. We're not going to read the entire interview because he's rambling on about a bunch of different stuff that he did in his life. But what we're just going to do is find the part where he talks about black artists. Hold on, where's the find button? We have to find the find button real quick. Yeah, find on page. All right, let's type black. All right, referring to, so there are millions of examples, right? All right, so this is the part where they talk about, to go back to the book now in the introduction to the book, am I let off the hook, David? Am I forgiven? All right. Okay, no, hold on, wait. All right. Yeah. This is the part. So to get back to the book now in the introduction to the book, am I let off the hook, David? Am I forgiven? That's not for me to decide. And then Jan Wenner says, history will speak. The interviewer then says, history will speak. This is also a history will speak kind of question. There are 7 subjects in the new book, 7 white guys. In the introduction, you acknowledge that performers of color and women performers are not just in your zeitgeist, which to my mind is not plausible for Jan Wenner, Janis Joplin, Joni Mitchell, Stevie Nicks, Stevie Wonder. The list keeps going. Not in your zeitgeist. What do you think is the deeper explanation for why you interviewed the subjects you interviewed and not other subjects? Well, let me just, says Jan Wenner, trying to weasel out of it. Carole King, Madonna. The interviewer keeps going on. Hold on. Water break. Y'all drink more water. We building heavy right now. I'm even busting out sweating. Let me take a water break. All right. Carole King, Madonna. There are a million examples, says the interviewer. Jan Wenner says, when I was referring to the zeitgeist, I was referring to black performers, not to the female performers, okay? Just to get that accurate. The selection was not a deliberate selection. It was kind of intuitive over the years. It just fell together that way. The people had to meet a couple criteria, but it was just kind of my personal interest and love of them. Insofar as the women, just none of them were as articulate enough on this intellectual level. A lot of the white supremacists think they are smarter than they really are, especially for a guy who has never played an instrument in his life. As far as we know, we read his entire biography. Ain't nothing in there said that he picked up a guitar, that he started singing, that he started writing music. So who are you to decide who is intellectual enough? How can you look at so many women like Carole King, like Madonna, and say that you know more than them about music? You got to be sexist. You got to be racist. You got to be anti-black to say this sort of stuff. The black performers were not in your zeitgeist. And let's keep it real. What does zeitgeist mean? What does the word zeitgeist literally mean? It means of the times, of the times. And there is no way Jan Wenner, born in 1946, did not grow up and hear Motown, did not grow up and hear all of the great black performers and musicians and writers who were dominating music, like Louis Armstrong. Are you playing with me right now? Ike and Tina Turner, basically helped invent rock and roll. You don't have Tina Turner. You don't have Tina Turner in there talking about rock and roll. Are you serious right now? Rest in peace, Tina Turner, man. Are you playing with me right now? Y'all put Tina Turner in the chat. Y'all turn up right now. Y'all let me know, man. Come on now. I'm just getting hot the more I think about it because I don't really have a lot of artists on the top of my mind because, like I said at the very beginning, I'm not really that much into older music. I'm a hip hop baby. I listen to a lot of hip hop. That's what I'm into. And yes, I know I should dig more and educate myself more on music. But Tina Turner ain't in your book talking about the masters of rock and roll. Are you playing with me? She was there from the beginning to the very end. 40-year career, straight up legend. And you're going to say, who are you talking about? Let's really look at this list. His list is Bono, Bob Dylan, Jerry Garcia, Mick Jagger, John Lennon, Bruce Springsteen, and Pete Townshend. Ain't none of them even touching Beyonce, let alone Tina Turner. Stop fucking playing with me right now. I might get demonetized because I might get so hot. Are you really serious right now? When I really think about it, are you really talking about? Come on now. Come on now. They ain't even playing with me. It's y'all crazy. Let's keep going. Oh, stop it, says the interviewer. You're telling me Joni Mitchell is not articulate enough on an intellectual level. Hold on a second. I'll let you rephrase that. All right. Thank you. It's not that they're not creative geniuses. It's not that they're inarticulate. Although, go have a deep conversation with Grace Slick or Janis Joplin. Please be my guest. You know, Joni was not a philosopher of rock and roll. She didn't, in my mind, meet the test. Not by her work, not by other interviews she did. The people I interviewed were the kind of philosophers of rock and roll. Jerry Garcia is not a philosopher. Bono is not a philosopher. These guys are just guys who made some good songs. We have to stop looking at musicians and these sorts of things as if they are some deep intellectual species. Since, you know what, the worst thing that ever happened to music was the invention of dad rock. And dad rock was never even really invented. It's not like somebody invented it. Who was the guy that just died? Man, that guy who just died, he maybe invented like that dad rock thing, man. I forgot because I don't even pay attention to that sort of music. But basically, dad rock is basically Kiss, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, the Beatles, music that was made for kids of that time. And as those kids got older, they started philosophizing about it, looking deeper into it than what it really was, and acting like the music wasn't just simply entertainment to make you do the twist. Like, come on now. Like, I hate that sort of thing when people look back on art and look into it too deeply. And this is rock and roll. This is happening in hip hop too. We have hip hop as well. Basically, people are debating about Nas and Jay Z all day, listening to Reasonable Doubt four times backwards to say, "Yo, Jay Z was speaking on another level with his Volume 1 and 2." Like, it can get a bit weird when people start digging into music this deeply. But there are no philosophers of rock and roll. There are some people who made some good songs, who have some good insight, who have some stories to tell about their heyday, but there's no such thing as the philosophy of rock and roll. But we do have the history of rock and roll. And the reason it's important to fight back against this idea that the black artists weren't of his zeitgeist or the black artists weren't articulate enough to talk about rock and roll and that sort of thing, that's bullshit. And that's going to help this lie that's constantly being pushed by the media, which is owned by a few people, to push this lie that black music, black creators didn't contribute to American art forms like rock and roll. Let's go. Of black artists, says Jan Wenner, you know Stevie Wonder, genius, right? I suppose when you use a word as broad as masters, the fault is using that word. Maybe Marvin Gaye or Curtis Mayfield. I mean, they just didn't articulate at that level. The interviewer then says, how do you know if you didn't give them a chance? Jan Wenner says, because I read interviews with them. I listen to their music. I mean, look at what Pete Townshend was writing about, or Jagger, or any of them. There were deep things about a particular generation, a particular spirit, and a particular attitude about rock and roll. Not that the others weren't, but these were the ones that could really articulate it. How can a bunch of white men articulate rock and roll music heavy like that? Like, keep it real. Like, there's this constant divorcing of the roots of an art form and the performers who gain success from it. Let's keep it real. I don't know if Jagger's from the UK or America, but a lot of music is based on soul. It's based on soul. And a lot of these artists that he has in here. Who are they again? I have to keep reminding myself who he's even talking to. Bono, Bob Dylan, Jerry Garcia, Mick Jagger, John Lennon, Bruce Springsteen, and Pete Townshend. Ain't none of them got soul like that. Let's keep it real. These people are trying to divorce our art form from the culture it comes from and letting Mick Jagger be the voice for a black art form like that. Let's keep it real. Mick Jagger is English, says Ozzy in the chat. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Act Dennis in the chat saying, to be honest, even though I like the classic rock and roll hits occasionally, they all kind of sound the same. That's funny to me. That's funny to me. Listen, I want people to like whatever they like. You can like, whatever type of music you're into. But let's get back into the chat. Ozzy did a laughing emoji. Act Dennis says, RIP Tina Turner. Act Dennis also said, it's incredibly sad that a guy with such backwards thinking is in such a powerful position. Ain't that true? Ozzy said Tina Turner. Ozzy said Simon going in. And then, let's keep going. So let's continue reading. As we're seeing in the actual article from the New York Times that I bought just so y'all can read it yourselves, this man was not taken out of context. And in fact, he's standing his ground. I love a white supremacist that's honest. I love a white supremacist who stands their ground, because when they stand their ground and when they're honest and when they're too old to actually give a fuck about being canceled or anything like that, that's when we get the real. That's when we find out how they really think about us. And that's how we can strategize to fight against them. Let's continue. Don't you think it's actually more to do with your own interest as a fan and a listener than anything particular to the artist? I think the problem is when you start saying things like they or these artists can't. Really, it's a reflection of what you're interested in more than any ability or inability on the part of these artists, isn't it? That was my number one thing. The selection was intuitive. It was what I was interested in, just for the public relations sake. Maybe I should have gone and found one black and one woman. I that's how you hey, we're done. Live stream's done. That's live stream's done. Whenever you hear a white man say, I need to find one black, you know what he thinks about us. That's a hard R, buddy. That guy drops hard R's. That guy drops hard R's on the golf course. I should have found one black. Hey, can anybody find a black for me to put in the book? Let me continue, man. Then we're going to get to the history of rock and roll. I swear, we're not going to drag this out by talking about a white supremacist for 90% of the stream. I promise you. We're almost done here. Let's go. I should have found one black and one woman artist to include here that didn't measure up to that same historical standard, just to avert this kind of criticism, which I get it. I had a chance to do it, but maybe I'm old fashioned and I don't give a fuck or whatever. I wish in retrospect, I could have interviewed Marvin Gaye. Maybe he'd have been the guy. Maybe Otis Redding, had he lived, would have been the guy. But you interviewed John Lennon for your book. You included the John Lennon interviews. And I'm sure in Rolling Stone, there is like a Marvin Gaye interview, a Curtis Mayfield interview, an Otis Redding interview. Ike Turner is still walking around. And even though Ike Turner is permanently canceled, didn't he win like a Grammy like a few years ago for like best rock and roll album or something like that? Like Ike Turner arguably invented rock and roll. And nobody can articulate rock and roll better than the man who helped invent it himself and was with one of the greatest rock stars of all time, Tina Turner. Are you playing with me right now? Are you playing with me right now? Listen, we're not going to even give Jan Wenner any more shine right now, because the white supremacists like Jan are going to be defeated in time. He's going to pass on. Hopefully, his hateful and stupid way of looking at the world isn't passed on to his children. But we are going to set the record straight for our children, for our watchers, for our viewers, and our listeners. Let's talk about this. Who invented rock and roll? This is an article from Mike.com, and I'm going to educate myself, and hopefully you're educated as we read this article, published on March 7th, 2017. Who invented rock and roll? These are the black pioneers who laid the genre's foundations. When Americans think of rock and roll, most tend to associate the origins of the music genre with the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley. However, the beginnings of rock and roll must also be attributed to the influence of black culture and music. Hold on. The blues had an illegitimate baby and we named it rock and roll. Little Richard, man, come on. As we start reading, I might stop, because I'm like, how can you say you're talking to the masters of rock and you ain't got Little Richard in it? Come on now. Tutti Frutti. Let me get a Tutti Frutti in the chat from somebody, man. Tutti Frutti, Bombalooty. Yeah, let's talk. Anyway, Little Richard, one of the originators of rock and roll as we know it, once said, according to the Real Clear History, having started as rhythm and blues music in the 1940s before gaining a foothold and evolving in the 50s. No one person can lay claim to inventing rock and roll, the rock and roll phenomenon. The we Little Richard is alluding to refers to black rock and roll pioneers such as Little Richard himself, a young Ike Turner, Bo Diddley, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and Chuck Berry. Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Ike Turner, Bo Diddley. Come on, man. Come on, man. Ozzy gave me a tutti frutti. Let's go, man. Pause. Let's go, man. Come on, man. Let's keep building. Let's keep building. Please pay attention. Please pay attention, Chad. I know we're having fun tonight. We might be getting lit right now. You might be watching me on the stream, getting your drink on, your smoke on. You might be chilling at work or got me in the headphones. But please pay attention to the deep history we're building on. We have to always remember everything great about American culture, American society, American music. The most influential parts of America have come from us as a people. And we're not going to let anybody denigrate us. We're not going to let anybody say we can't philosophize about rock and roll. We invented rock and roll. We'll do it again too. Let's continue. Rock and roll was influenced by a deep South black music genre called the blues. Rock and roll, started out as rhythm and blues. Little Richard told Times in 2001. There wasn't nobody playing it at the time but black people, myself, Fats Domino, Chuck Berry. White kids started paying more attention to this music. White girls were going over to the music. They needed somebody to come in there, like Elvis. See? See the fear of the black penis, negrophilophobia will always cause the white supremacists to shoot themselves in the foot. They had to deal with Elvis's weird gyrating ass rather than letting a real one like Little Richard come into the concert, play on the radio. They dealt with Elvis doing the same thing that the black artists would have done, drive the little white girls crazy. Instead, they had little white trashy Elvis doing the same thing. It's stupid. It's stupid. The white supremacists always shoot themselves in the foot. Let's go. While many names can be attributed to the shaping of the genre, only one person can lay claim to the creation of that classic rock and roll sound: Sister Rosetta Tharpe, a self taught guitarist who successfully crossed over from gospel music to rock and roll. If you look back at the most influential musicians of the 20th century, she's probably in the top 10. Bob Murs, a Pennsylvania based writer and publisher who once organized a benefit concert to pay for a memorial for Tharpe, told NPR, "Listen, man, what is the irony? What's the irony of all of this right now?" This guy, Jan Wenner, said that black artists are not articulate enough to talk about rock and roll. Women are not articulate enough to talk about rock and roll. But who is literally one of the founders of rock and roll, if not the founder of that classic rock and roll sound, according to this article? A black woman. Think about that right now. Think about that right now. White supremacists like Jan Wenner are going to sit here and tell us and publish a book that's probably going to be a New York Times bestseller and go all out across the world and tell people, black people and women aren't smart enough to talk about the philosophies and the deep intricacies of rock and roll. But when we look deep into the history, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know much about her, and maybe y'all can do some more digging and give us information, and you can go on YouTube and listen to her music herself. But listen with your own ears. A black woman helped invent rock and roll. And now we have white supremacists today who say they got to talk to Bono. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. We're not playing, man. We're not playing. We're not going to let the white supremacists dictate to us who our heroes are, who are the masters. We're the masters. Let's go. Brittany Howard of Alabama Shakes, the rock band that won multiple awards at the 58th Grammys, paid tribute to her predecessor with an outfit that reminded many of the late Tharpe. Oh, here's the video. Okay. Okay, this is dope. This is dope. I want to check out this band, Alabama Shakes. Y'all check out Alabama Shakes, man. And shout out to my guy, Gary Clark Jr., one of my favorite artists right now. Is a rock artist out of Texas, out of Austin, Texas. His name is Gary Clark Jr., real tall, skinny black guy, gives you Jimi Hendrix vibes. I saw him for the first time playing with Beyonce at the Grammys or something like that, on YouTube. Really dope performance. Type in Beyonce, Gary Clark Jr. He comes on stage with her and rips the guitar. But he has a very, very dope song called "This Land." This Land is a very dope song. I want y'all to check it out. It's a black rock and roll song with soul, heart, rhythm. It's real deep. It's real deep. I want y'all to check out Gary Clark Jr. because a lot of people think black people stopped making rock and roll. Of course, rock and roll now has been dominated by white artists, but black people never stopped making rock and roll. And all the genres that we invented, there are black people still doing them, for real, for real. Some of them might be minorities in those genres, but we never stopped. We're going to build on country another time. We're not going to talk about country today. So she had a major impact on artists like Elvis. Gail Wald, a professor of English at George Washington University, and author of Shout, Sister Shout, The Untold Story of Rock and Roll, Trailblazer's sister Rosetta Tharpe, told a film crew, according to Fusion, when you see Elvis singing songs early in his career, I think you should imagine he is channeling Rosetta Tharpe. It is not an image that I think we're used to thinking of in rock and roll history. We don't think about the black women behind the young white man. Another originator of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee Lloyd Price has said that Elvis is not responsible for the creation of the genre. I knew Elvis, he told the New York Sun in 2004. This is media history, not real history. Rolling Stone started in 1967. So how can they say who started rock and roll in 1954? The fact is that Fats Domino sold more records than Elvis between 1953 and 1956. I loved Elvis, but it's a lie to say he invented anything. Let's keep it real, guys. If somebody can tell me, and I really want to know, I'm not going to put a challenge up like I'll delete my channel or delete the live stream. I know I'm very famous for doing that, but I'm going to ask a real question, real serious question. What has, what music art form was directly, did not come from us? I'm going to say that. What music art form in the Americas did not come from us? I really want to know. What music art form does not have a black creator to it? I really want to know. Somebody tell me in the chat if you know. That's a real serious question. That's a real serious question. Y'all gonna be up all night Googling that. Y'all might chat GPT that. Y'all can do whatever. But even way, your answer is probably gonna be wrong. Because somebody might say house music, wrong. Electronic music, wrong. Punk, wrong. Metal, wrong. Country, wrong. Bluegrass, wrong. Nah, not country. Not country. Country comes from us too. Country comes from like gospel music. Country comes from like soul music. Country comes from the blues as well. Nah, nah, none of it. None of it. Y'all can do your digging. Y'all can do your digging. Bluegrass, wrong. Let's keep going, man. Let's keep going. But that doesn't mean Elvis meant to steal the spotlight from black rock musicians. Presley, by all accounts, was quick to acknowledge his debt to African American performers. Noah Berlatsky wrote for The Atlantic. And scholars have even argued that by playing multiracial music for multiracial audiences, he helped point the path away from segregation. Get the fuck out of here, man. I hate when people say, Elvis couldn't have been racist because, he was playing black music. He stole some black songs from black creators. He couldn't have been racist. He helped white people like black music. As if white people didn't like the black music already, which is the whole reason why Elvis got a deal, because white people liked the music, but they just hated the people that made it. It's dumb. It's dumb. It's really dumb. From my understanding of history, back in the day, those concerts used to be segregated. The white people got the front row seats and the black people had to sit in the nosebleeds. And a lot of black performers like Ray Charles, how do you not have Ray Charles in your book about the masters of rock and roll? A lot of black performers like James Brown, how do you not have James Brown in your book about the masters of rock and roll? A lot of those black performers said, we're not going to do that no more. We're not going to go down to the South and play segregated crowds. A lot of the black rock and roll artists said that they would go do white shows one day, then a black show the next day. And if they did a show with white and black people, the black people would be way in the back. The black artists said, we're not doing that no more. That was the beginning of the end of segregation, not Elvis. Elvis, from my recollection, said he was going to continue to play the segregated shows. If Elvis was against segregation, he would have said, I'm not playing those segregated shows. He never did. Elvis was all about the money. Elvis was all about the self, all about himself. And in the words of Chuck D, Elvis ain't a hero to me. That motherfucker was straight up racist. Let's go. I'm not playing tonight. It's Saturday. It's Saturday. And we're only talking about music. So I don't think people are going to get too butthurt. Let's go, man. Early black rock and roll artists were influenced by other forms of music, such as country music, which led to many different subsets and spin offs of the genre. While there is no exact birth date for the creation of rock and roll, it is impossible to ignore the influence of black Americans during the genre's infancy. And even that, they're playing it down. Not the influence, the origin. The origin. Even in these articles that are sympathetic towards the truth that we invented this, they still have to play that game. Black people had a lot of influence in it. Now, let's talk origin. We're not talking influence, we're talking origin. And let's keep on building about rock and roll. One of the interesting things about this music genre, like all music genres, there are differences. There are general differences on the history of rock and roll. Some people say Ike Turner created it. Some people say Fats Domino. Some people say Chuck Berry. Some people say the lady that we just talked about, who I just learned about. What was her name? Sister Rosetta Tharpe, rest in peace to her and bless her family. There's differences in opinion about where exactly it started, because a music genre is not a baby. You can't pin down its birth. But something that they all have in common, all the people I named, they are black Americans. Let's keep it real. Nobody, no serious musical historian will sit here and tell you that Elvis was the origin, or any other white creator who picked up the guitar was the origin of rock and roll music. And even though there might be discrepancies on who created the term or who created the sound exactly, the most innovative music styles, and when we listen back to those recordings, they were all black musicians creating that. Let's go. This is another article that's in the description of this chat. You can build on it yourself about the history of rock and roll. We're not letting up on white supremacists like Jan Wenner, who says black musicians are not articulate enough or sophisticated enough to talk about rock and roll, when we are rock and roll. Let's go. In 1965, Fats Domino said, "What they call rock and roll is rhythm and blues. I've been playing it for 15 years in New Orleans. Shout out Louisiana. Wah." Rock and roll was the inevitable clash of African American rhythm and blues with elements of swing, boogie woogie, urban blues, Latin rhythms, clave, country and western, rockabilly, and Tin Pan Alley popular song, all infused with a teenage sense of rebellion and independence that blossomed just after World War II. Early rock and roll artists established a distinct sound characterized by an aggressive beat and prominent electric guitars, saxophone solos, and pumping pianos. To be young in the mid 50s to early 60s and not be a rock and roll fan was to be a square. And Jan Wenner, you are a square, you square ass motherfucker. The term rock and roll has been traced back as far back as the 1920s in black music, when Trixie Smith recorded "My Baby Rocks Me with One Steady Roll" in 1922. Y'all go check out that song, "My Baby Rocks Me with One Steady Roll," the first rock and roll song. There's always disputes. I've heard some people say Ike Turner's song "Rocket 45" or something is the first rock and roll song, but they're taking it even further back, 1922. Let's go. Let's go, man. Our ancestors did not play. Much respect to all of our ancestors. It became the accepted label for this developing genre when in 1951, Cleveland disc jockey Alan Freed began calling his rhythm and blues radio show Moondog's Rock and Roll Party. Little Richard, Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, and several other African American singer, songwriter, musicians were among the first to transform the sound of rhythm and blues by introducing new musical elements. And of course, Ike and Tina here. Proud Mary, keep on burning. Let me get a Proud Mary in the chat. This is now a Tina Turner celebration, man. For real, like for real. As soon as I thought of Tina Turner, it made me hate Jan Wenner even more. Ain't no way you talking about the masters of rock and roll and Proud Mary ain't up in that thing stomping through. Rest in peace, Tina Turner. Even though she did, hey, I'm gonna keep it real though. Tina Turner was a bit anti-black. She said she kind of dislikes black people and she couldn't get away from black people, and that's why she moved to Switzerland, and that's why she gave up her American citizenship. But we're not going to fault our ancestors that much, because Tina went through a lot of hell. I'm going to keep it real. I'm always gonna chastise Tina for what she said about black people. You know what I mean? She said black people were nasty and she didn't like being around black people. I'm gonna keep it real, but that's because Tina came from the gutter. Tina is from the gutter. Like, if y'all don't believe me, y'all go watch the documentary HBO did about Tina Turner and where she grew up. Poverty, shacks, man, it's raw. Also, there's another YouTuber, Ashley Says So, who did a very good breakdown on Tina Turner's life. And yeah, Tina Turner went through some things. So listen, we don't fault our ancestors. Hell, I done heard black ass black American grandma talk spicy about black people. You know, you always got those. Let's keep it a buck. If you black, you know right now, you heard some stuff from your grandma, from your uncle, from your granddaddy, hell, from your daddy or your mama talking bad about black people, because a lot of us have been indoctrinated with white supremacist thinking because we grow up in America too, and we believe a lot of the stuff the white supremacists tell us implicitly. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. Tina Turner was a victim of the white supremacist mindset that affects poor black Americans, man. She grew up with it. She grew up with it. So even though Tina was not the best, we still respect her because it's not about what she said about black people, really. Because even if she was Candace Owens, I would not take away from Candace Owens if she, wow, true. Yeah, I'm keeping it real. I'm keeping it real. Y'all, all that stuff I'm saying about Tina Turner is facts. You can find interviews. She really didn't, really rock with us like that. But it's the symptom of what infects the minds of our people. So let's continue reading. Widely considered to be the first rock and roll record, the 1951 song Rocket 88, that's the song, recorded by Ike Turner's band, the Kings of Rhythm, and credited to its vocalist Jackie Benston and his Delta Cats, features many of the hallmarks of rock and roll style: quick upbeat tempo, propulsive rhythm, distorted honking saxophone solo. 4 years later, a critical mass of artists elaborated the rock and roll sound. Little Richard Penniman, replaced the standard R&B shuffle rhythm popularized in Louis Jordan's Caledonia with a faster beat that came to characterize rock and roll. Little Richard's drummer Charles Connor explains how Little Richard created the rock and roll beat. Little Richard, Tutti Frutti, 1955, and Fats Domino, Blueberry Hill, 1956, repositioned the piano form from accompanying instrument to the foreground and established the triplet piano figure as a key component of the music. Beautiful, beautiful. Now that's philosophizing about music and that's breaking music down. But let's keep it real. Bono can't do that. Jerry Garcia can't do that. The only people who can really philosophize and build on music and the elements of music that make it special and what separates each genre are really music historians. So to say that you don't have Jan Wenner, and I'm talking about Jan Wenner here. Jan Wenner saying, Joni Mitchell or Madonna couldn't break down music the way it needs to be broken down. Neither could Bono or Jerry Garcia or what's his name, man? Any of those old white guys. The only people that can really do that are music historians, people that have PhDs in music. And those are not musicians usually. They're people who study music as a profession and teach it. So let's keep it real, man. Jan Wenner is a racist, a white supremacist, and hateful towards black people. And we're not going to let that bring us down because we never let racism bring it down. We use it as a moment to educate ourselves and our people and always speak truth to power. Let's go. As rhythm and blues transitioned to rock and roll, vocalists such as Ruth Brown, Mama, He Treats Your Daughter Mean, 1953, Laverne Baker, Tweedledee D, 1955, and Etta James singing with the Joni Otis Orchestra, The Wallflower, 1955, established the rhythmic vocal style that characterized rock and roll and promoted the music to black and white teen audiences. The prominence of the electric guitar is played by Chuck Berry, Maybelline, 1955, and Bo Diddley, 1955, with Chuck Berry, made the guitar a focal soloing instrument, ultimately displacing the saxophone from the central position it held in rhythm and blues, and inspired young fans in England as well as America to learn to play the guitar. Alongside the more frenetic instrumental rock and roll sound of the mid 1950s, teenage doo-wop a cappella harmony groups such as the Clovers, Don't You Know I Love You, 1951, and Billy Ward and his Dominoes, Have Mercy Baby, 1952, developed a unique sound defined by their roots in Southern flavored blues and gospel music, respectively. They added instrumental combo accompaniment that included solo tenor sax, hand clapping, and an emphasis on beats 2 and 4 that Wild Bill Moore popularized and We're Gonna Rock, We're Gonna Roll, 1947. It's the most powerful paragraph we've read tonight. Hands down. I want everybody to screenshot this right now. Take a moment to take notes of all of these songs right now. Do your own research right now. The real inventors of rock and roll have been us from the very beginning. The evidence is clear. They can't do it like they used to do it. In the past, the white supremacists would see our inventions, our creations, our cultural contributions, and take them. And there was no recording, no evidence to back up our claims that we are the rightful owners. But listen, this is indisputable proof on who we are, the true masters of rock and roll, culture, genre, music. Everything great about America comes from us, man. We are not playing right now. We're not playing tonight. Not at all. Do your research. Do the screenshots. Play this back. Do your own research. Come and debate me, but you're gonna lose because it's the truth. We standing on truth and justice tonight, and we standing against white supremacists who want to denigrate us. And it's not just any old random old white guy. If you guys are coming into the chat now, Jan Wenner is a very rich, powerful man who has dominated media and how people talk about music for decades. And he has probably been doing some real sick stuff behind the scenes to make sure that we don't get our proper credit. But we're fighting back tonight. Some doo-wop groups took the names of cars as their own, such as the Cadillacs, Speedo, 1955, and the Eldorados, At My Front Door, 1955. Others took the names of birds, such as the Orioles, Crying in the Chapel, 1953, and the Flamingos, I Only Have Eyes for You, 1959. Other singing groups, particularly the Coasters, Yakety Yak, 1958, and Charlie Brown, 1959, specialized in novelty or comedy-styled songs. Other vocal groups included the Chords, Little Anthony and the Imperials, Tears on My Pillow, 1958, and Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, 1956. The Platters were one of the most commercially successful vocal groups of the era, and their song, The Great Pretender, 1955, was the first doo-wop group to reach #1 on the pop charts. All female harmony groups also came on the scene in the late 1950s. The Chantels, Maybe, 1957, and the Bobettes, Mr. Lee, 1957, were followed successfully in the early 60s by the Shirelles, who were the first all-female group to have a #1 pop hit in the rock and roll era. Their song, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, charted in 1960 and ushered in a critical mass of all-female girl groups onto the R&B and pop charts. Most of these groups, including the Crystals, the Chiffons, and the Ronettes, Be My Baby, 1963, were African American. The black vocal group sound became a staple of pop radio during the 1960s through girl group music and the music of artists recording for the Detroit-based Motown label, which produced a steady stream of hits featuring artists such as Mary Wells, The Miracles, featuring Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder, Martha and the Vandellas, The Temptations, The Four Tops, Marvin Gaye, and The Supremes, featuring Diana Ross. Peace to all of our ancestors. Peace to all of our innovators. Peace to everybody mentioned here. Though their names might be forgotten by the masses, they're not forgotten by us. And I want everybody to do their research on these people. A lot of the times we think of boy bands, we think of NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. But the boy band and the girl band was invented by us as well. Come on, even while we inventing rock and roll, we're inventing genres of music that won't be popular until 30, 40 years later. Who's dominating the world right now? BTS, right? K-pop, bunch of boy bands and girl bands, but we did that in the 1950s. Stop playing with us. Stop playing with us, man. Stop playing with us. Jan Wenner, go eat a bag of baby dicks. We're not playing with any of y'all, man. Any of y'all who want to disrespect our ancestors, we're going to stand up and always speak truth to power. Let's go. Let's go to the chat right now. Dennis says, I'm still mad about Tina, LOL. If he doesn't acknowledge her power in the genre, then I can't take this guy seriously. Facts, Acty, facts. Let's go. We're going to keep on building real quick. The rhythm and blues and rock and roll songs of black artists influenced their white counterparts. Several established and or advanced their careers in rock and roll by covering the recordings of black artists, synthesizing the same rhythm and blues elements that their black counterparts had updated, and adding elements of country and western music to the mix. These artists include Bill Haley and his Comets, Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, and the Everly Brothers. By the mid to late 60s, British artists such as the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, the Yardbirds, and the Animals had begun to cover and interpret black rock and roll and urban blues from the previous 25 years. Their hybrid productions, introduced to Americans through the British invasion, launched with the arrival of the Beatles in the US in 1965, ultimately evolved into what became known as rock music. At the same time, black artists such as Sly and the Family Stone, Buddy Miles, Jimi Hendrix, recording with Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding as the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and Love, created a unique rock sound by fusing elements from rhythm and blues, gospel, funk, and soul with guitar-driven grooves and innovative technologies. Jimi Hendrix and Sly and the Family Stone both performed at Woodstock, the iconic concert event of the 1960s, and were among the most popular and visible figures in rock. African Americans also had an impact on rock working behind the scenes. Tom Wilson helped launch the folk rock movement through his work as producer of Bob Dylan's first electric album, Bringing It All Back Home, 1965, and of Dylan's biggest hit single, Like a Rolling Stone, 1965. Wilson's decision to add electric guitar, bass, and drums to folk duo Simon and Garfunkel's acoustic track, The Sounds of Silence, 1966, modeled the fusion of electric instrumentation and folk music that characterized the new subgenre. Starting in the 1960s and continuing into the 1970s, the gospel derived background vocals of African American women vocalists such as Darlene Love, Madeline Bell, Doris Troy, Vanetta Fields, Clyde King, Gloria Jones, Claudia Lanier, and Mary Clayton, who is well known for her contribution to the Rolling Stones' 1969 single Gimme Shelter, became fixtures on a wide range of recordings by white rock artists such as Dusty Springfield, the Rolling Stones, Joe Cocker, Humble Pie, Pink Floyd, Leonard Skinner, and Bob Dylan. In spite of the presence of these African American artists in the rock scene, by the end of the 1960s, the majority of musicians and fans associated with the music were white, a result of record label and media decision making that linked musical genres to racial categories. Thus, rock became associated with British and American white artists. Let's keep it a buck, man. So many of us innovate and create new musical styles that become so popular, we become victims of our own success. Black people make music that becomes so popular that everybody wants to take it. We just have to acknowledge that rock music suffered its own success. It was so popular because of the innovations that were done basically all in 1955, because I was saying 1955 the most during the entire night. We created music that was so popular that years later, like a decade and a half later, by the 1960s, all the white boys are jumping on it and they got to start playing the music. And of course, the record labels are going to sign the white artists before they sign the black artists, because the white artists are more marketable and less threatening to white audiences because of white supremacist thinking, right? We just had to acknowledge that. And no, things have not changed that much. We are still fighting to keep hip hop because the record executives have been trying for a few years to continue to push out more and more white rappers. They got lucky with Eminem because Eminem has soul and Eminem has true talent. But every few years, they try to push a Jack Harlow on us. Every few years, they try to push a Machine Gun Kelly on us. Every few years, much love to the brother, I knew him in university, but every few years, they try to push a G-Eazy on us. Every few years that happens, and we always resist them, not because black people are hateful, but because we realize that it's not coming from an authentic place, and the white artists sometimes can't deliver in hip hop a specific medium the way that black artists can. I'm just keeping it a buck, man. I'm sweating tonight because I'm going hard in the paint. We're going to continue building on the history of rock and roll. Let's go. Rock and roll is generally faster and more aggressive than 1940s rhythm and blues. The combination of a rock and roll beat created by Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, and others with sing-along refrains known as hook lines appealed to the musical tastes and cultural values of America's youth. The addition of strings to some recordings, notably those of the Drifters, the Platters, and the Shirelles, gave the music an urbane sound that complemented the youthful vocal qualities of the singers. Shout out to all the ancestors and the innovators that came before. The song lyrics of early rock and roll usually focused on the behavior, experiences, romantic feelings, and fantasies of teenagers, distinguishing them from the more adult themes of rhythm and blues. Key examples are Chuck Berry's School Day, Ring Ring Goes the Bell, 1957, and Sweet Little 16, 1958, and Crystal's He's a Rebel, 1962. Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, I Want You to Be My Girl, 1956. Jerry Lee Lewis's Great Balls of Fire, 1958. The Shirelles' Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, 1960. And Schieffel's He's So Fine, 1963. Elvis Presley's All Shook Up, 1957, and the Ronettes' Be My Baby, 1963. Many early rock and roll songs also featured comic or humorous lyrics, such as Little Richard's Tutti Frutti, 1955, Chuck Berry's Maybelline, 1955, and Roll Over Beethoven, 1956, and the Coasters' Searching, 1957, and Youngblood, 1957, and Charlie Brown, 1959. Nonsensical words and non-words characterize some recordings, such as Gene Vincent's Be Bop Alua and Little Richard's declaration, A Woom Bam Aloop Bop, a Woom Bam Bam. I'm tripping right now. You know Tutti Frutti, man. I'm tripping. I've been ranting all night, but we going in. And the song titles Shaboom by the Chords in 1955 and Tweedledee 1955 and Bop Tingaling 1955 by Laverne Baker, much to the chagrin of American parents and music teachers who derided the new genre as rubbish, which in turn made teenagers enjoy it even more. Let's keep it real. Rock and roll, like any American music, is all about slang, right? A lot of it incorporates slang. And the thing is, the white supremacists hate when we invent new words in slang. But the majority of the words that are now common American lexicon came from a lot of black musicians and just black culture in general. I'll keep it very simple. Here's a very good example. A long time ago, there were jazz musicians who would play, and these guys would tour across the country, ride on the trains, and uh, and these guys would perform their music in front of white crowds, right? The jazz musicians, the early jazz musicians, and they would go in front of these crowds that were used to seeing black people in blackface, meaning that they were actually looking at a white man who put coal or tar on his face to pretend to be a white man. Some of the early jazz musicians were the first performers in front of white audiences, the first black men. That's why when you look at these images of the jazz musicians, all of them have to wear suits, all of them look very formal and regal. The jazz musicians, when they would show up to these white clubs, the white men and sometimes even white women would be hella racist towards these people, making monkey noises, throwing bananas on stage, calling them all sorts of racial slurs and we're going to keep it cool because these crackers are going to try to make us hot under our collar. Keep it cool. Cool, a word, of course, that usually means the temperature is, not warm, a bit below warm, entered the American lexicon from jazz musicians. And now, cool, if you look in the dictionary, has another meaning for being calm and collected. True story, true facts. Look it up. I'm not making up stuff. We keep it real over here and we keep the memory of our ancestors alive. There are people right now all across the world who don't speak English, but they say, that's cool. Racist white people say black people are not cool, not realizing that they don't know that the roots of this word go back to our ancestors who were dealing with racist white people who couldn't imagine seeing black men with suits and dignity playing jazz, playing an innovative art form right in front of them, right in front of their eyes, while their wives get all wet in the panties. We keep it real. We keep it real. We keep it black. We keep it raw on this channel. And we're always going to tell our truth and tell the story of our ancestors. Rest in peace, Little Richard. Rest in peace, Fats Domino. Rest in peace, Chuck Berry. Rest in peace, Bo Diddley. Shout out to the Platters. Rest in peace, Ruth Brown. Rest in peace, Laverne Baker. Rest in peace, Etta James. Rest in peace, the Coasters. Ike and Tina Turner. Rest in peace, Tina. Shout out to Ike. The Shirelles, shout out to them. These are the faces. And listen, some people now, they can't whitewash this. We got pictures and we got the music. You see the faces of these black creators. They're all right here. Click the links if you don't believe me. Look up the music if you don't believe me. We've been outside. We will stay outside, man. This piece, this beautiful piece that we read, was written by Maureen Mahan, PhD. She is an associate professor in the Department of Music at New York University. She is the author of Black Diamond Queens, African American Women, and Rock and Roll, Duke University Press 2020, and Right to Rock, the Black Rock Coalition, and the Cultural Politics of Race. Yes. Shout out to you, Maureen. Y'all go pick up her book. Y'all go support her articles and everything like that. Listen, I'm going to wrap up this stream here. I was going to go harder on some other articles, but I think we got the point across. We got the point across, man. So I want to say thank you to everybody who came through to show me love in this live stream. We were building on some real heavy topics tonight, real heavy. And I'm really glad that I was able to get this live stream out. Today has been hella busy. I've been doing a lot of classes and I still got some more work to do. And I got some more content coming from y'all that's very interesting. I want y'all to know that that the platform is open for everybody. Anybody who wants to get a spot on here, who wants to talk, who wants to share information for our people, who wants to debate, who wants to hop in the stream with me talking about a topic, just hit me up. I'm out here to build, I'm out here to connect, and I'm also out here to keep it real, black and raw, and inform our people and fight against white supremacists like Jan Wenner, who says that the masters of rock and roll are some 83-year-old white men, right? Let's get to some last comments before we're out of here. Act Dennis says, now that's a person who is qualified to talk about music. Amen. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Shout out to everybody who watched this live stream, who's been in the chat showing me love. Shout out to Ozzy. Shout out to OZB. Shout out to Guyana Brent. Shout out to everybody who was out here supporting your boy. Make sure y'all like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, and all that. Peace.